I'm worried about my husband, and I don't know what's happening. We're going through a really tough time right now, and he's been really depressed. Well, he was until 3 days ago, when all of a sudden he's all calm and happy. Like a switch flipped, and he's absurdly calm, as if he wasn't sad before. It sent my alarm bells ringing, but I chalked it up to him just trying to get over his emotions. We live 15 minutes from a big university where both of our children, 21 and 19, attend. They came home randomly yesterday, and I was caught off guard. They said their father requested them to come over because he wanted to give them something. He proceeded to give them 2 boxes full of their childhood memories: teddy bears, photo albums, old toys, etc. It was so odd because they're in college, and one lives in a dorm, and the other lives in a college apartment with friends. It would make more sense for that stuff to stay here at the house, but he seemed so insistent on giving them these relics from the past, and seemed overly happy to do so. Today, he stayed home from work. I work part-time and didn't have work today. He's been cleaning all day. He's always helped clean up, but today he's doing a deep clean, which is something that he usually dreads doing. I'm worried. I don't know what this mood switch is, and I don't even know what to search on Google. It seems like normal stuff, but I know him, and this is definitely not normal, especially the suddenness. Does anyone know what could be happening? Has this happened to anyone else? In the comments, Agreeing Storm 9 says, "Has your husband been sleeping well lately? I don't want to be alarmist, but this is 100% a giant, big red flashing warning flag of a possible suicide attempt. You should call 988 right now and ask them what resources are available to help him. Tell me if any of this might possibly ring true to your situation. Husband has been depressed and going through a tough time. He decides he's going to kill himself. He suddenly feels much better because now he has a plan to get out of the situation. He's relieved. He calls the kids and gives them childhood stuff. This is stuff that he treasured, but he knows he won't need it anymore. Now he's cleaning because he wants to make you happy too and give you a nice house. Seriously, when you see this message, either sit him down and ask him very directly if he is suicidal and has a plan. If you can't do that, call 988 like right now. He could be at very high risk of killing himself. As someone who has to deal with that grief every day, I don't want you to be a part of that club that I'm in. You should talk to him. Call 988 yourself and not leave him alone. Also, not to frighten OP, but please keep yourself on high alert and safe since he's giving your children their things and deep cleaning as if he doesn't want them to have to return to the home. OP, suicides and homicides are very real. Be on guard. Didn't even think of this, but an absolute reality. It's the giving stuff to the children and deep cleaning that makes me frightened for OP. If he was giving items to people who didn't live in the home, or could return to the home whenever they wanted, I'd think he was only thinking suicide. But deep cleaning and making their children take their stuff out of their parents' home, which I assume they are welcome to visit at any time, that seems extra concerning. Further down in the comments, they say that this is pink clouding. I've never heard of the term before, but that means a period of intense happiness and optimism that can occur after someone first becomes sober. And I'm guessing in this case, sober from the depression. But it also applies to like drug detoxing, alcohol detoxing, and a bunch of other things as well. I thought these comments were very much helpful, and if anyone is in a similar situation, just know that 988, if you're in the States at least, is the number for that. Because as I'm reading as well, underneath all of these comments, a lot of people are saying they would have loved to know that that was the number to call and that there was help for signs like this. And now, onto the update, 1 day later. I want to thank everyone who commented. I only had 45 comments when I decided to talk to my husband and hadn't been on Reddit since, so coming on and seeing 300 plus comments is overwhelming. After reading those comments and seeing suicide mentioned so much, I got a knot in my stomach and researched behaviors of someone ready to commit, and sure enough, it matched his. I got so mad at myself for being so ignorant to behaviors of mental health crises. I went to talk to him, and I told him that I love him so much, and if he was planning to do something to himself, that he didn't have to, and that I'd help him with anything. I said much more in a more loving way. He then broke down crying. Guys, I've only seen this man cry once, and that was his father's funeral, and even that was just a few tears. This was more of a cry, full-on breakdown. I held him, and we both cried. He told me that he was broken and didn't feel like he could go on, and that we'd be better off without him. I vehemently told him that he was absolutely wrong and that we'd be destroyed without him. We talked for hours, and I asked for his permission to call his sister, who is the only person outside of our immediate family that he trusts fully. She came over, and we all talked for a while. His sister and I convinced him to let us take him to the ER. Thank you guys for this advice. After the medical and mental evaluation, they concluded that he was high risk, and they kept him. That opened my eyes to how bad it was. That's pretty much it. They still have him, and I'm at home. His sister offered to stay with me, but I told her to go home. She has her own family, and I don't want to keep her from them. I don't know what to tell our kids, or even if I should tell them. I'm lost and worried, and I just want to help my husband. In the comments, Existing Source says, "You are an absolutely amazing human and wife. Do not assume that you should have known. Most of us never even think of suicide as a real thing until it's presented like this. You did the most absolutely right thing by noticing signs and reaching out to us. I'm so frickin' proud of you. I know it's a lot to carry. You will go through waves of emotions. Please consider popping into a counselor just to talk it out. You'll want to be strong for him, but you're human too, and this is heavy." Very well written. I second this about a counselor or therapist. Although we have to be strong for them sometimes, it's hard to carry, and there is nothing wrong with reaching out for any type of crutch during hard times. Agreeing Storm says, "This post makes my day. I am so happy that you got him help. You were able to do the thing that I wish I or someone else had been able to do for my friend. As for your children, you have to keep it age appropriate. With my 10-year-old, I tell them that my friend was sick and he died and I miss him. With my wife, she knows the whole story. Truth is good for any relationship. Secrets kill. If your kids are older, tell them their dad is struggling with his mental health and you're getting him help." And OP replies, "Our kids are in college, so I can be more blunt about it. I'm worried about if my husband wants them to know. You know? I wouldn't want to divulge this information to them if he didn't want to. Maybe I'm overthinking. My mind is all over the place currently." An Existing Source replies, "I would not. He trusted you. Don't abuse that trust right now. It's delicate. He gave you permission for his sister. Just let the dust settle right now. Talk to a counselor and tell them together if needed later. But this is a delicate time right now with your husband and his trust in the world." And OP replies, "This is how I'm leaning. This is such a vulnerable time for him. I don't want to let them know until I know he is okay with it." Individual Finance says, "Kudos to this woman for taking immediate action. She saved this man's life. I'm so heartened to see it too. It disturbs me how many times shallow women get the ick when their stoic, strong man finally lets go and cries. Seeing her worry, post, and take immediate action is exactly what a good spouse does. Reddit did an amazing job conveying urgency too. Everyone's a superstar. I've always told my partner that it takes more courage for him to release his feelings than it would to bottle them up. That makes him more of a man in my eyes, not less." Absolutely. I'm completely on board with that one. I think if your partner gets the ick for you, opening up like this, breaking down when you're in a state, especially like OP's partner, I think that speaks more of your partner than anything else. And that, in and of itself, is a bit of a warning sign. I can't imagine that this story ends well if OP is not the kind and amazing person that they have been and shown themselves to be. Thank you for doing the right thing, thank you for seeking advice, and thank you for actioning that advice, OP. You really did save his life. Our next post is by user Unique Emergency 3407, and it's titled, Nightmare Situation. Me, 35 female, with partner, 40 male, my son and his nephews, 15 males. 4 years ago, I met Bob. Bob had recently become the guardian of his nephew Ben after the death of Ben's parents in a car accident. Ben is the same age as my son Jason, 11 at the time, now 15. At first it seemed perfect. I was over the moon at finding a man who was not put off by the prospect of taking on a soon-to-be teenage stepson. Jason's father is not in the picture, and in spite of being very different personalities, the boys got along from the beginning, so Bob and Ben moved into my house within less than a year. Ben was always a quieter, more creative kid, where Jason is more athletic and boisterous. And from the start, I got the sense that Bob understood Jason's ways of being more than he did Ben's. At first, he would take them both to sports games, but Ben obviously had no interest, and so pretty soon he just took Jason. At the time, it seemed like a natural choice. Ben was bored at the games, and Jason honestly reveled in having all of Bob's attention. But after things started unraveling, as they grew older, the difference in the boys became more obvious. Their choices of clothing, hairstyle, friends, music, hobbies, etc. And so did Bob's preference. He started making little comments comparing them and encouraging Ben to be more like Jason. At first it seemed like he was trying to be helpful, thinking that Jason's way of being was healthier. He's more outgoing, has a more active social life, etc., because that's what he remembered from his own experience. But after a while, there was a clear snideness there which it was impossible not to hear. My son has always had a strong protective streak / sense of fairness, and in spite of their differences and the late age they were introduced, he and Ben are very close. So Jason's reaction to Bob's remarks favoring him was to take Ben's side. He stopped going to games with Bob and generally liking him, and for a while became openly hostile on Ben's behalf. That stopped once he and Bob had a major argument. Jason backed down at that point because, he told me, he realized that if he kept making himself unpleasant, Bob and I might break up, in which case Ben would have to leave too. And since then, with a few exceptions, he has been coldly civil. Meanwhile, Bob has come to believe that Ben is gay based on what I considered spurious evidence. Not that it matters to me whether he is or not. He wanted to send him to a military-type reform school, and when I vetoed that, his behavior towards Ben has escalated to a subtle kind of downright nastiness. Needless to say, all of the above strained Bob's and my relationship to the breaking point and then broke it. Seeing his ongoing behavior towards a child who needs him, I can no longer look at him with anything but disgust. The thought of him touching me makes my skin crawl, and I desperately want him out of my house. We are not married, and it's still in my sole name, thank God. But now I have the same problem Jason was worried about. If I end the relationship and kick Bob out, Ben will have to go too, since legally I have no tie to him whatsoever. He's 15 now, and although he's borne everything by stoically ignoring Bob, I can't in good conscience let that man be solely responsible for him. For what it's worth, I've always tried to stick up for him and get Bob to see that there are many types of boys in the world, and all of them are equally okay. Not to mention, I don't think Jason would ever forgive me if I did. I would happily take guardianship of Ben if I could. Even if Bob made no financial contribution at all, we could manage if we cut back on luxuries. My concern is that I'm far from sure Bob would agree. However he personally feels about Ben, Ben is still his flesh and blood, and Bob feels strongly about that. To be honest, I think it's part of the reason that he resents Ben so much. Ben is the last of the line, and not turning out how Bob thinks his family should be represented. If I were to start a conversation along those lines, and Bob refused to allow Ben to stay, it would be incredibly difficult to roll back. The idea of having to continue to play his supportive wife to stop him leaving of his own accord for another 2.5 years, until Ben turns 18, Sounds like a nightmare. But the alternative is worse. What's the best way to manage and get through this? In the comments, Hotspur Jr. says, "So you've gotten some good advice here. Just to reiterate, talk to Ben. Tell him that he always has a home with you and that you are not going to do anything which will make his home situation unstable. Tell him that you love him and appreciate him for who he is, and that you know that things are fraught. I know you don't particularly think Ben is gay, but I think you should talk to him in a way that makes clear that you don't care, without saying as much. Talk to a lawyer. Find out how, if you kick Bob out, Ben can stay. How old does he have to be to make that choice? You want to avoid a legal fight, but it's good to know what the law is. Talk to your son. Tell him that you appreciate him standing up for Ben to Bob. Tell him that you agree that Bob is behaving unacceptably. Tell him that you're trying to figure out a way to keep Ben safe from Bob and that you will never take Bob's side over him and Ben. Tell him that you recognize that the current situation with Bob is unhealthy for everyone, and that you're actively trying to figure out a way to resolve it while protecting Ben. Don't tell Bob any of this. Have all of these conversations quietly until you're ready to take action because you've had the discussion with a lawyer. Furthermore, once you're ready to take action, talk to Ben and Jason before you tell Bob." And OP replies, "Thank you very much for saying this. I must admit, in all of this, I've gone from trying to smooth things between them and Bob to trying to find a way out for all of us, and have not prioritized communicating with the boys as much as I could have. I'm going to try to get some alone time with each of them this weekend to at least reassure them that I see what is happening and value them." The hat on the cat says, "Talk to Bob and let him know that you want to legally adopt Ben. Probably wise not to mention it as breakup custody insurance. Just say that you've really come to see him as family and both boys as your sons, and you want to make it official. If Bob agrees, then you'll have some play for custody. Also, you aren't morally obligated to be in a sexual relationship with someone who you dislike to stay in Ben's life. That's not a fair requirement. I know you're worried the boys will hate or be mad at you, including your son Jason, but I'd talk to Jason honestly one-on-one if and when you do break up with Bob. Tell him that you love Ben and want to look out for him and stay in his life as much as you can, and you've been staying in the relationship for a while for that reason. But you've reached the point where you just can't keep being with a man who you don't see as a good person. I would hope that Jason, who you say is naturally protective, will understand and be protective of you, his own mother, if you show him your feelings and good intentions rather than condemn you for not prostituting yourself. I very much doubt that your son would expect that of you. None of us expect that of you. As for Ben, if you break up and Bob won't let you have any custody, talk to Ben about it. Tell him you love him and that you see him as a son, and the way Bob treats him is wrong, and why you don't respect Bob. Tell Ben that he has done nothing wrong and you very much want to stay a part of his life, and you will try to as much as Bob allows. But current situation is blah blah blah. That you will be talking to a lawyer, and that if nothing else, Ben should know that he is always welcome to move back in the minute he turns 18. And OP replies, "Thank you for saying that. You are right. I know Jason would understand it if I explained it to him. I think my real problem is that if something happened to Ben, I would have a hard time forgiving myself. At the moment, I'm hoping it won't come to either of those situations. The comments here have given me some hope, and I'm going to speak to a lawyer about our options." Edit. Thank you all so much for your support, advice, and kind words. Your comments have given me a lot to think about, and I'll be making contact with a family lawyer shortly. She wasn't wrong with the title there. Nightmare situation, absolutely. I'm glad the comments can give some pathway forward as to how to handle this situation, and I do wonder if Bob would take the bait in allowing OP to legally adopt Ben, because that to me sounds like a really good idea. I genuinely don't see the downsides in this situation. The only downside I see is staying with Bob over the long term for Ben's sake, which everyone is saying is a bad idea. Curious to see how this plays out. And now, onto the update, 39 days later. Hi again everyone. I posted about my family problem about a month ago and was bowled over by the amount of kind and extremely helpful comments I got. Someone requested an update, so I'm posting now to tell you what has happened since. To be honest, it's also to unburden myself. The boys are really sweet, but I obviously can't talk to them about these things, and there aren't a lot of people in my life that I feel comfortable sharing all the details with. I suppose I'm embarrassed. The week after my original post, I met with a family lawyer that I know to go over options. I actually wrote down the legal suggestions posted here to discuss with her, but unfortunately, after going over each and several others in detail, we had to conclude that for each one, while it might technically be feasible, it would either take too long to be practical or require things from Bob or from Ben, which for various reasons were not ideal. Following the meeting, I was mulling things over and decided to take a long, hard look at our finances to see what might be affordable as a compromise, such as perhaps sending Ben to a good boarding school and pay tuition up front so that if I then left Bob, it would be easier and cheaper for him to leave Ben there rather than move him to a different school. Anyways, I went over our financial records with a fine-toothed comb, and that's when I discovered that Bob was cheating on me and had been for the entirety of our relationship. It turns out that prior to Ben's parents' death, Bob had been about to move in with another woman. This woman didn't want kids, so when Bob was suddenly faced with taking custody of Ben or seeing him placed in foster care, she made it clear that she would not be involved. For the record, I can't say that I blame her. I love my boys with all my heart, but asking someone who never wanted kids to parent a bereaved 11-year-old that she has never met is not in anyone's best interests, in my opinion. When I confronted him about the affair, he didn't even attempt to deny it. He seemed ashamed and just asked what happened next. So I told him that next he was going to get his stuff and get out of my house, but first ask Ben if he wants to go or stay, because it wouldn't be fair to disrupt the poor kid's life any further. Ben quickly said that he preferred to stay, and Bob seemed frankly relieved. He moved out that weekend, and I haven't seen him since. We have been in touch by text to discuss financial arrangements though, and last week he sent me money to cover Ben's basic expenses. Nothing like as much as child support, but under the circumstances, I'll take it and be glad. From his attitude, I take it that he's seeing this as a long-term thing. But even if he doesn't, according to the family lawyer, his leaving Ben with me, even for a while, along with Ben's age, and the fact that Bob is his guardian rather than his father, would make it easier to build a case for Ben to stay, even if Bob does try to fight it. The lawyer is confident that such a battle could be won, or at least dragged out till Ben is 18 and it doesn't matter anymore. So that, as you can imagine, has been an enormous relief. That makes it much harder to admit that finding out about Bob has still hit me hard. The fact is that, even though I was absolutely done with him and wanted him out, there was a time that I truly believed he wanted to be with me and that we could build a life together. I knew our relationship wasn't a romance for the ages or anything like that, but it was by far the best that I'd had since before my son was born, and I really thought that we cared for and valued one another. Now I realize that all he ever wanted from me was a mother for Ben. He was good and admitted it, and in retrospect, it makes complete sense. That's why he never wanted to get married or buy into my house, even though I offered. Though now, of course, I am grateful, because he wanted to make it as easy as possible to split from me once Ben was old enough to no longer require my services. I think it might even explain why he was so hard on Ben and grasping at straws for a reason to send him away. I never expected it of him based on what else I knew, or I never would have been with him. But if he was blaming Ben for getting in the way of his life and simultaneously feeling guilty for, that could turn a mild-mannered person mean, I think. Maybe he even thought that if Ben was away most of the time, the other woman would be willing to compromise for a few years. I don't know. I've even been wondering whether he decided to pursue me before we'd even met. The boys met first through an extracurricular where they became friends. It's possible that Jason mentioned me being single in passing, allowing Bob to identify me as potentially suitable before we ever met. I'm sorry this is such a mopey post. I truly am grateful for the way things worked out. I think it's the best possible solution for everyone under the circumstances, and not one that I could have achieved without Bob's help, quote unquote. And the boys have been wonderful. They didn't know that I was trying to get Bob out anyway, so they've been treating me very gently, or as gently as you can expect teenage boys to be, anyway, and trying to pretend they aren't thrilled that Bob is gone when I'm in the room. I'm glad of that, to be honest. I'm so grateful he's gone, and Ben is still safe here with us. I just need a bit of time to really remember it, I think. In the comments, Aunt Rose104 says, I think what stuck with me the most was Jason saying he realized that if he kept being rude to Bob, him and OP would break up, and that would mean that Ben would leave, and Jason wanted Ben to stay. I don't know why that got to me so much, but it did. Pascal replies, he has so much empathy for his brother from another mother that he was able to put his own feelings aside to keep his brother safe and with a great mum. OP is doing a lot of things right to raise two boys like that. I wish them all the best and hope Bob gets what he deserves. And also the fact that he's so willing to share his mum. Some kids resent sharing their parent with a step-sibling and can't even be compassionate enough about their dead parent to at least hide their resentment or jealousy. Jason was completely open about sharing parental love, both from his own mother and also the father figure that was supposed to be Ben's. So much so that he was offended on Ben's behalf when Bob wouldn't show his own orphaned, blood relative the same parental attention that he was getting as a non-relative with living parents. It's inspiring and hopeful to see. Ukoshi says, I didn't go into this expecting to be relieved that OP's partner was cheating, giving her a way to get the best result for the kids. I seriously hope Bob never shows his scumbag self around them once Ben is 18. Dude is pathetic. I don't think he'll give him a second thought, which is useful for custody and stability purposes, but still has to hurt. May Bob forever step on Legos while barefoot. And may he run out of toilet paper the next time he takes a shit, guys. And I hope his dick gets caught in a zipper. Like, yes, it's a relief that he was cheating and that, like, it worked out this way, but there were so many different avenues Bob could have taken to not put himself and everyone in this situation. What a terrible and heartless human being to do this to everyone. I'm happy that OP was able to work it out, but I'm not happy that OP had to be in this situation in the first place. This was so easily avoidable. For me, this is like the definition of bittersweet. This is a very bittersweet ending. Thank you for sharing the story with us, OP. I appreciate you immensely. Thank you for all the work that you have done and continue to do for these boys. And I hope they grow up recognizing just how amazing of a mother you really are. And that's all I have for you today, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, let me know what you thought of it in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!